Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The United States has extended its pause on threatened military strikes against Iranian energy infrastructure by 10 days, pushing a critical deadline to April 6. This comes amid major escalation by Israeli forces, which announced it had killed Iran's Navy commander. Military chiefs from 35 countries around the world, including South Korea, held talks on plans to reopen the Strait of Hormuz once the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran ends. Led by France, the talks focus on potential post-conflict operations to restore shipping once hostilities ease. Starting today, South Korea has raised its fuel price cap by more than 200 won per liter as global oil prices continue to climb. The new cap will remain in place for 2 weeks through April 9th. For the second time this week, U.S. President Donald Trump has extended an ultimatum for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping traffic, noting peace talks are going very well. But as Washington allows a brief window for diplomacy, regional tensions continue, following Israel's assassination of the Iranian naval commander overseeing the blockade of the waterway. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
The United States has given Iran another reprieve, halting threatened military strikes on its energy infrastructure to allow room for diplomacy. U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 10-day pause on the destruction of Iranian energy plants, pushing an existing deadline from March 27 to April 6. Taking to Truth Social on Thursday, the president noted the extension was requested by the Iranian government and that ongoing talks are progressing well. However, the rhetoric from Washington remains forceful. During a cabinet meeting, President Trump asserted that Iran's severely degraded military capabilities have left Tehran desperate for an agreement. He also issued a stern economic warning, stating that the U.S. seizing and gaining control of Iranian oil reserves remains a viable option if negotiations fail.
Who wouldn't negotiate? They are begging to make a deal. We'll see if we can make the right deal. And if they make the right deal, then the strait will open up. Hormuz Strait will open up.
The potential reopening of Strait of Hormuz is closely tied to the latest major escalation by Israeli forces. On Thursday, Israel announced it had killed the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy.
This man has a great deal of blood on his hands, and in addition, he was the one who led the closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
This key military figure was directly responsible for overseeing the ongoing blockade of the critical maritime transit route. Netanyahu also claimed the killing was a coordinated strategic effort with the United States to achieve broader wartime objectives. The combination of a tactical pause from Washington and a strategic strike from Israel leaves global energy markets and international supply chains highly volatile. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
France says its military chief has held talks with counterparts from 35 countries, including South Korea, on plans to reopen the Strait of Hormuz once the U.S.-Israeli conflict with Iran subsides. According to France's defense ministry on Thursday, the talks focused on potential post-conflict operations to restore shipping once hostilities ease. Officials say the plan could involve a strictly defensive mission, including escorting commercial vessels and ensuring freedom of navigation through the strait. The defense ministry stressed that the meeting served as an opportunity to gather positions from countries willing to join a joint effort to help ensure safe maritime navigation in the strategic region. So the United States has once again decided to delay a threatened strike on Iran's energy infrastructure, this time extending by 10 days. For more on this, we're joined today by Dr. Baek Seung-hoon, researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Dr. Baek, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me to your show.
So this is the second time President Donald Trump is extending the deadline. So what's the U.S. strategy here?
My sense is that the U.S. strategy is coercive diplomacy. Trump is keeping the threat of force in place, but delaying the most escalatory option in order to see whether military pressure can produce a negotiated opening of Hormuz without triggering a wider regional energy war. That matters because a prolonged disruption there could remove 13 to 40 million barrels a day from global supply. So Washington is trying to balance leverage, diplomacy, and market stability all at once. So the risk is that repeated extension may buy time, but they may also convince Tehran that the U.S. is more constrained than it wants to appear.
I see. And the White House says talks are gaining momentum, but Iran denies engaging in any negotiations with the United States. So both sides are describing things very differently. Why are the two sides sending conflicting messages, and what do you make of the latest developments in this war?
Both sides are sending conflict messages because they are speaking to different audience and trying to preserve different forms of leverage. For the White House, saying that the talks are gaining momentum serves three purposes. It reassures markets, it signals to regional allies that Washington is still in control of the escalation ladder, and it increases psychological pressure on Tehran by suggesting that Iran is looking for an exit. For Iranian side, publicly denying a negotiation is about regime legitimacy. Tehran does not want to look as though it is negotiating on the bombardment or accepting American terms from a position of weakness. So what we are seeing is not necessarily a contradiction between diplomacy and denial. It is a familiar pattern of indirect diplomacy paired with public posturing. So as for the war itself, the latest developments suggest neither side has achieved decisive political victory. The United States and Israel has inflicted serious military damage on Iran, but Iran still retains enough capacity to keep the conflict costly. So especially through missile attack, regional escalation, and disruption around the Strait of Hormuz. So Washington has pursued some strikes, and it is clearly testing whether military pressure can now be converted into diplomacy. So my reading at this is that the war may be moving into a bargaining phase, but it is not yet moving into settlement phase.
I see. And while it's still unclear who the Trump administration is holding talks with, the United States and Israel have reportedly removed 2 senior Iranian officials from their target list. So is Washington trying to signal that they're not going to harm them and is encouraging them to come to the negotiating table?
Yes, I think that is the most plausible interpretation. So that Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi and the speakers, the head, the Ghalibaf were taken off Israel hit list after Pakistan urged Washington to intervene, precisely because killing them would have damaged any remaining diplomatic channel. That does not mean the United States suddenly trusts those figures or has identified them as future partners in a broad rapprochement. It means something narrower than more tactical. If you want diplomacy, you need surviving interlocutor. So in war like this, there's an open and unspoken distinction between targets who are militarily expendable and officials who remain politically useful. By pulling back from strike on those individuals, Washington appears to sending a limited but important signal. We are still leaving room for an off-limb. So at the same time, I would not overstate the significance of this move. The Israel official insists no Iranian leader is permanently off-limit. So this is less guarantee or safe than a temporary diplomatic holding pattern. So in other words, Washington is not offering the trust, it is offering a narrow window. The message is essentially, we are still prepared to talk, but not indefinitely and not without major concession. That is a coercive signal, not a conciliatory one.
Speaking of peace talks, Iran has rejected a 15-point peace plan proposed by the Trump administration, and instead they issued their own demands. What do both sides want from each other, and do you think the two sides can actually reach a deal?
At the broadest level, the United States wants Iran to emerge from this war strategically weakened and structurally constrained. The American proposal includes removing or dismantling Iran's enriched uranium stockpile, halting enrichment, curbing ballistic missile development, and ending support for regional partners and proxy groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas and Houthis. From Washington's perspective, this is not just a ceasefire package. It is an attempt to rewrite the terms of Iranian regional power projection. But Iran, by contrast, wants a deal that looks less like surrender and more like reciprocal like de-escalation. So the Tehran is demanding a permanent halt to attacks, compensation for wartime damage, recognition of its position regarding the Strait of Hormuz, and no concession on its core defensive posture, especially missile range. So Iran also wants any broader settlement to address the Lebanon front, which show Tehran is still trying to negotiate regionally, not just bilaterally. So can they reach a deal? Yes, but probably not a comprehensive one in the immediate term. The gap is simply too wide. So the U.S. wants rollback. Iran wants to guarantee and face-saving reciprocity. So what looks more realistic is an interim arrangement, limited de-escalation, a pursuit in selected strikes, indirect talk through mediators, and perhaps a narrow understanding on maritime passage and escalation control. So a full strategic settlement is possible only if both sides lower their maximalist demand. So right now, they have not done that. So I would say a deal is possible, but a grand bargaining is still unlikely in the near term. So there is a possibility that the Trump administration will going to extend another concession and then start doing the bargaining for about 3 or 4 weeks before the summit meeting with China begins.
I see. So not anytime soon. And Dr. Pak, before I let you go, last Friday, Iran fired missiles targeted a joint U.S.-UK military base in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. And that place is 4,000 kilometers away from Iran. And that's roughly twice the range Tehran has publicly claimed for its ballistic missiles. So how far can Iran's missiles actually reach, and how serious is this threat?
Iran always claimed that they have the peaceful spaceship program. So I believe 4,000 to 5,000 is their maximum. But I don't believe they have a capability to hit United States, because 4,000 is not enough. They need 12,000 to actually reach the United States, which is three times longer range of 4,000. So I mean, but they do have capability to hit Israel in any place of Iran territory. So they're kind of like showing that, you know, even in the mountainous area, hiding space, they could shoot and they could hit Israel and all the U.S. bases within the Middle East and their boundaries. So that is an important signal that Tehran have like shown. But I don't believe they have capability to actually hit or strike United States yet.
I see. All right, Dr. Pak, thanks so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Pleasure is mine.
South Korea has raised its fuel price cap by more than 200 Korean won per liter, with pump prices expected to climb into the 2,000 won range. And at the same time, the government is moving to restrict naphtha exports for 5 months as Middle East tensions disrupt energy supplies and raise concerns over shortages. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
South Korea's second fuel price cap took effect at midnight on Friday, raising limits by more than 200 won, or 15 cents per liter in just 2 weeks, as global oil prices continue to climb. Under the new cap, gasoline is set at 1,934 won, or about $1.43 per liter, while diesel is capped at 1,923 won, roughly $1.42. Kerosene is priced at 1,530 won, or around $1.13 per liter. Even with the measure, retail fuel prices are expected to enter the 2,001 range, or about $1.48 per liter, as pump prices had already been trending higher. Consumers say the burden is growing, with monthly fuel costs rising significantly.
I used to spend about 200,000 to 250,000 a month on gas, but now it's gone up to over 300,000 won, so it definitely feels like a much heavier burden.
The government says the adjustment reflects rising global oil prices while expanding tax relief to ease the impact. Fuel tax cuts have been widened to 15% for gasoline from the previous 7% and 25% for diesel from the previous 10%, lowering prices by up to 6 cents per liter, with a larger reduction for diesel due to its role in industry and logistics. Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chul says the goal is to balance market pressures with consumer relief. The new cap will remain in place through April 9th, with officials warning prices could continue to rise in the coming days. Authorities also say additional tax cuts remain possible if global oil prices climb further. Meanwhile, South Korea is moving to stabilize supply. The government will begin restricting the export of naphtha, used for manufacturing plastics and chemicals, for 5 months starting Friday, as shortages deepen amid the Middle East conflict. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources say the move follows supply disruptions after strikes on Iran, with South Korea importing about half of its naphtha through the Strait of Hormuz, a key route now effectively closed. To support domestic industries, authorities plan to expand low-interest loans and may raise import credit limits. About 11% of domestically produced naphtha exports will be redirected to local buyers. Officials say the measures are aimed at containing both rising consumer costs and growing supply risks as global energy uncertainty continues. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And the Korean government is doing all it can to reduce the economic impact of the Middle East conflict on daily life. A supplementary budget plan is set to be submitted to the National Assembly next week, urged by the president for swift processing. Our Ian-jin reports.
The government and the ruling Democratic Party are pushing for a supplementary budget proposal set to be submitted to the National Assembly on March 31st for swift processing. The announcement was made Thursday morning during a consultative meeting between government officials and DP lawmakers. This is part of efforts to mitigate the economic impact of the prolonged war in the Middle East. The plan is aimed at easing the burden of rising fuel costs, stabilizing livelihoods, and supporting small and mid-sized firms.
The 2026 supplementary budget proposal was developed to respond to high oil prices resulting from the war in the Middle East, as well as to support the livelihoods of vulnerable groups, such as small business owners and young people, to minimize damage to domestic industries and secure supply chain stability.
With the extra budget, the government plans to not only compensate oil refineries for losses incurred due to the government's implementation of a price cap system for petroleum products, but also to support the expansions of oil reserves to ensure the stable supply of naphtha and other rare earth elements. To reduce dependence on fossil fuels in the medium to long term, the party and government will also use the budget to support the distribution of residential renewable energy, such as solar power. Projects to promote public transport use for energy conservation will also be expanded. The extra budget will also expand assistance to support vulnerable groups, which includes low-income earners, small business owners, and young people, along with efforts to eliminate blind spots in welfare services to ensure that daily livelihoods are not affected by the Middle East conflict. Support funds will be discussed further and finalized at a later date. The government highlighted that this supplementary budget uses the excess tax revenue expected this year for the benefit of the people, and that it would not issue additional debt. As President Lee Jae-myung urged for swift parliamentary approval to minimize further economic damage. Ian-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea's convenience stores are under transformation. They're now betting on localized experiences, turning stores into K-food destinations, and even running hubs. Our Kim Jun-ong explains more.
A library of ramen fills a convenience store in Myeongdong. At the heart of a bustling tourist spot, this K-ramen specialty store showcases a wall nearly 3 meters tall, lined with around 170 different varieties.
Since we get a lot of foreign visitors, we've organized the ramyeon by spice levels. We also placed popular items like banana milk up front for easier access.
Customers choose their ramen and move to a cooking station, adding sides like kimchi and kimbap to recreate a local way of enjoying the dish.
I mean, it's kind of the variety of ramyun, how you can see here, and like the process how to make it with the machine. It's very easy, so it's very nice.
I tried something where the Netflix show was, the cook was selected, so it was very good but very spicy as well.
Elsewhere in the same building, the lower floor showcases souvenirs, K-beauty items, and K-pop merchandise, attracting anyone looking to experience Korean culture. Such trend comes as South Korea's convenience store industry saw the number of stores decline for the first time last year after nearly 4 decades of steady growth. Having long relied on expanding store networks to boost buying power, the model is now showing its limits as the market saturates. In response, the industry is now turning to new strategies.
It's not just foreign tourists that are being targeted. On the bank of the Han River here in Yeouido, this store attracts local runners, offering everything they need before and after a run.
With running as a hobby on the rise, this store offers lockers for storing belongings, along with a curated section dedicated to running gear. Changing rooms and a powder room add to runners' convenience, while a photo zone completes the experience.
I run 4 times a week. I came here once and liked it, so I came back. There are more energy gels and drinks than in other stores here. I also find the changing room really convenient.
Such specialized stores have emerged in part due to the growing dominance of online retail.
E-commerce has become central to Korea's retail landscape. Convenience stores, once defined by accessibility, now need to evolve beyond that. Strategies that focus on analyzing each local market and providing products and services tailored to local demand are becoming increasingly important.
Amid changing retail trends, convenience stores are redefining themselves as spaces designed for experiences. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. A New York federal court on Thursday began proceedings against the ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on narcoterrorism and drug trafficking charges. Prosecutors say Maduro directed a government-wide conspiracy that moved cocaine into the United States through Colombian rebel group FARC. Maduro and his wife Celia Flores pleaded not guilty to all charges. Meanwhile, Maduro's lead attorney threatened to walk off the case over a funding dispute. U.S. sanctions are currently blocking Maduro from using Venezuelan government funds to pay his defense fees. The presiding judge questioned the government's justification for blocking the payments, but declined to dismiss the charges. Wall Street posted its biggest single-day loss of the year on Thursday as the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran drove oil prices higher and pushed the Nasdaq into official correction territory. The Nasdaq fell 2.4%, ending more than 10% below its October record high. The S&P lost 1.7% and the Dow dropped 1%. U.S. crude settled up 4.6% as disruptions to oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz showed no sign of easing. The OECD said on Thursday that the conflict has wiped out a previously projected upgrade to global growth. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy arrived in Saudi Arabia on Thursday on an unannounced visit. Ukraine is currently advising Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, and Jordan on countering Iranian drone attacks in exchange for the high-end air defense missiles those nations possess. Meanwhile, European allies meeting in Finland on Thursday pledged to intensify action against Russia's shadow fleet of sanctioned oil tankers. A drone strike hit a sanctioned Russian-linked vessel in the Black Sea that same morning. The International Olympic Committee on Thursday confirmed that only biological female athletes will be eligible to compete in women's events at the Olympic Games. Starting with the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, the IOC will require all female category competitors to pass a one-time SRY gene screening, a saliva or cheek swab test that determines biological sex development. The IOC cited fairness and athlete safety as the basis for the policy. Limited exceptions apply for athletes with rare sex development disorders.
Along with a huge rise in afternoon temperatures, there has been a big rise in dust levels as well. Today looks like being worse, with additional dust forecast to move in later today. In particular, the capital region and inland Gangwon-do province could reach very bad levels during the morning and again at night. Meanwhile, dry weather alerts are being issued across much of Korea. And as you know, nationwide fire alert is currently at the alert level, so fire safety is a must. And this afternoon will be as warm or warmer than yesterday. Seoul will be getting up to 20 degrees Celsius. Daegu will be much warmer at 25 degrees under sunny skies nationwide, but skies will be blurred with layers of dust. Warm spring weather continues through the weekend, but air quality will stay in a bad range. So make sure to have a face mask when heading outdoors. Then some of the capital area is forecast to have a rainy start to the new week.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.